Hi everybody, I hope you are doing well. Today I'm going to show you something special about the AWS Directory Service. So I will with you o- throughout the design of the architecture, then the implementation of this lab, right? So for now I have already my AWS cloud or my AWS account. Then within my region that I will use the Paris region, I will create a VPC, a private cloud, a virtual private cloud, right? And in each region there will be a high availability or availability zone, sorry. And within that availability zone we will have subnets. So I choose that in each availability zone I will create one public subnet and one private subnet, and the same thing for the other availability zone as well. Then I will create our directory using the AWS directory service. This one here, right? Just here we are just designing the architecture, then we will implement it later on. But in this implementation of this architecture, I will explain the theory of how these things are work, right? So I will go and I will expand this one as well. In the Paris region, I will launch a directory, AWS directory service, and this directory service, right, it will launch two domain controllers. So domain controller is just a database where my computers and my users will be stored. So I will have the first domain controller and the second domain controller as well. There are two types of this directory in this AWS directory service. There is the standard and there is the enterprise. The difference between these two is that in the standard directory, you are not able to replicate this domain controller in different region, while in the enterprise edition you can achieve that. You can replicate the active directory or synchronize user between region to have a high availability, and this one is very useful in the in the service or in the disaster recovery. And this EC2 instance I will use it to launch an Windows server to manage these users here in my domain controller. I can add, delete, modify, and delegate permission to them, right? And another thing here is that I will use the Route 53 outbound point, and I will show you what means that. I will choose now Route 53, and this Route 53 is just the DNS of AWS, right? So here that when I will launch my VPC, my virtual private cloud, right? By default, we will have something. I will go to my VPC and I will show you something here that is the DHCP option sets. And what means this DHCP option set is that once you create your VPC, this default DHCP option set is this one is attached to your VPC. Like you have your DHCP that you create within your environment, for example, in your corporate data center or within an enterprise, right? And what this DHCP option set do? It provide the VPC with the domain name server. It is the default one, Amazon provider DNS, right? And with the domain name. So once your EC2 instance will be launched, and if you go, for example, in Linux under etc, let me open Notepad to, if you go under etc resolve.conf in Linux, you will find that there is search, right? And then this domain, and under it you will find name server, and then here for this Amazon provider DNS, you will find that the DNS IP address, it will be taken from your VPC CIDR. For example, if I have my VPC CIDR that is 10.0.0/16, then the name server or the DNS IP address, it will be the VPC plus 2, mean that here the DNS server IP address will be .2, right? So every time when from your EC2 instance, when you try to query something, or for example search for Google or another URL, then that query go and check for the DNS that reside within in etc/resolve.conf, and that's this the DNS server. It will go first thing, it will go to the private hosted zone. Let me show you here. I will open the Route 53. It will go there and resolve and try. For example, if I give it, for example, abdlali.com, right? And then it will go to the hosted zone, and it will go to the private DNS. And especially for the hosted zone, we have the public hosted zone and the private hosted zone. So first thing, it will go in to see whether, for example, if I have abdali.com, I have to make sure to first is that his hosted zone, private hosted zone, is associated with my VPC. Mean if, for example, from within this VPC, right, from this EC2 instance, I ping abdlali.com, and this VPC is attached or associated with this private hosted zone, right, then the query will successful and I will have a response. But if this VPC is not associated with this private hosted zone, then I will have a timeout error, because that server will not know about this domain. So to avoid to having a timeout error, you have to come to your private hosted zone and then edit the hosted zone, and here you will have an option of associate to a VPC. Then you can choose the region where your VPC reside. For example, in my case, in Paris, and then my VPC, it is this one I will use during this lab. I hope this is clear for you. But now the other problem is that, but what if, for example, I have another DNS server that is here? For example, let me have another, I have my DNS server here, right? And this DNS server, for example, have this domain name. How can I ping from this instance to this domain? So I have two options or three options. For example, this domain reside within my on-premise data center, right? What I have to do, how this instance will know about this domain name, right? Because this domain name is not hosted on my private hosted zone on the Amazon Route 53. So the first thing that when I will try to type ping this domain name, it will go to the Amazon Route 53 private zone and check for this domain name. So if it is not able to resolve this domain name, then it will tell you that the name server is not known. So to resolve this problem, you have two options. Either you can go to your VPC, right, and then create another DHCP option set right here, and then you can give it a name, for example, blah blah blah. scroll down here, and then here you give it the name .com, right? And here you give it the IP address of your data center or for your DNS server on your on-premise data center, right? For example, 10.0 dot whatever it is, right? And keep it the default as well, and leave other things as default, and create a DHCP option set, right? Then you can come back to your VPC, this VPC, right, where your instance will reside, and go to this VPC and this one that we will use, and go to the actions, right? And here you can click on edit DHCP option and choose the one that we have created here. And once it is created, so when the instance will try to ping it or try to ping to this domain, it will not work. You know why? Because this IP address range that is here in the DHCP is not the same as the IP address that we the IP address that we gave to the DHCP or to the DNS is not included in the range of this IP address, and this IP address is not mentioned in the route, or is not mentioned in the route table of any subnet. So for that we have created what we call the VPN to create a connection between on-premises data center and our VPC. So I will not go deeper into this because it is not our goal in this lab. Our goal is to create this directory, AWS directory service, and then create a client VPN. Another option here, the second solution here is that you have to create a VPN between your VPC and your data center. And another thing here is to create something we call it the outbound point. So what this outbound point do is this outbound, or what they call it here, is AWS Route 53 resolver. So once this EC2 instance will send a query to this domain name, then this outbound role will know that this ICMP request should be forwarded to the DNS server that reside within the on-premise data center. We have the outbound role, or the outbound point, and the inbound point. So the difference between both of them, as their name indicates, that for the outbound point is the traffic that, or the queries, the DNS queries that flow from your VPC toward the DNS server that reside within your on-premise data center. And about the inbound point is that the DNS queries that flow from your on-premise data center to your Amazon Route 53. So if all the traffic or all the DNS queries that come from your on-premise data center DNS server, right, it will go to the input, this inbound endpoint, right, and then this inbound endpoint, right, it will forward that request to your DNS that reside within your VPC. So let me remove this one and let us complete our lab. And once I will create this AWS directory service, I will create some users here, and this user, I will allow them to use their credential to authenticate via the AWS client to our VPC. So this client VPN, once we will create it, it's going to create an ANI. Is the network interfaces. Right? You can choose, once you will create it, it will give you which subnet you want your ANI reside within it. So, because in reality, this AWS directory service, or for example RDS, or another services, for example AWS Lambda, when you try to create an AWS Lambda within your VPC, in reality that service you do not create that entire service within your subnet, but rather than you ask your AWS provider to create an ANI within your VPC that you have created. So when you send a request, is just you send it to the ANI. You do not send it to the entire service. For example, RDS. RDS is AWS managed service. So it's just create an ANI that deploys within a subnet. And the same thing here for AWS directory service. It is, or it create as well here an ANI and another ANI as well for high availability. Right? So once we create all of this, now I will create, or I will install openvpn.net community download software. This software is the one that will enable me to interact or to upload the configuration that I will create later on. So let us jump to the practice, so to understand what's going on. So the first thing I'm going to do is go and create a directory service. So we are working in Paris, in the region US3, right? Now we'll set up a directory. We'll choose the AWS managed Microsoft AD, and this one is used when for example, I will show you, for example, an example as well, is that when you deal with an enterprise edition, as here this showing you, when I will choose this one, it will give me enterprise edition and standard edition. For example, here you have in enterprise edition, you will have another region here, and within that region, right, you will have a synchronization of users that is created in the first region to the second region, right? For example here, but I will show you later on that when you will try to select which AWS directory service provider you will choose, you will be not able to choose the replicated one. So for that you have to create at the first ID connect, the first, then once you create it, and then you can select it. So this one is, for example, if you want to create a high availability for your client VPN. So in this lab I will go only with the standard edition. For the qualified name I will choose myname.org. NetBIOS is just the prefix, or is the prefix, right, of your domain or your directory or your DNS name. and then scroll down, and you have to remember this password because we will use it later on. And then choose next, and here they ask you which VPC you want this AWS directory service to display or to deploy an ANI or create an ANI. So in this subnets, here where our ANI will be created, and they will show you later on that. So private, it does not matter if you create them in public or in private. And then private second one. So this one take time, it take about 15 minutes to be created or more. So in the same time, let me show you what's the steps you have to do before you dive into the AWS client VPN. So you have to install this software, and then once you install it, you will have it here, right? And then you have to double click on it and choose install, and once it is installed, right, you will have a white icon here, right? And this white icon, you can right click on it, and then it will ask you for a port file. This file, we will download it once we will create our client VPN here. I will show you later on. So I will scroll down here and look for a VPN and click on client VPN endpoint. So to achieve that, we will need as well something, we will use the AWS Certificate Manager or ACM. So this certificate will generate some key and search for the client and for the server as well. So to achieve or to authenticate user, you can either use only ACM or use the AWS directory service users as well. In this lab, I will show you both of them because many of people just in their videos just show only the ACM part and the other one not. So here I tried to achieve that and show you both of them. So for that, you just go here and type client VPN authentication, and then here go to the documentation, and then click on client authentication. So there are Active Directory authentication, mutual authentication, this one use certificate, and there is single sign-on authentication. So for the mutual authentication, they will give you some steps that you have to follow to achieve that. So the first thing, if you are on Linux or on Mac OS, you have to follow these steps. If you are on Windows, you have to follow this one as well. So me, I have used Linux, and I have followed these steps, right? You can just follow them as well, right? The same one as here. I have already done that. So here, right, if I try to now to get in AZ3, and then here the AWS ACM, you can first get in PKE, and then here where you will have the certificate authority, and then I have copy and pasted the AWS client and the server certificate, and I paste them in this directory, that is AWS, ACM. So I have the certificate authority, the client certificate, the client key, the server certificate, and the server key. And the next step is you have to import those certificates to your ACM or to the AWS certificate manager. Because we'll use that later. So I have already done that as well. So you have just to copy this this command and make sure that you are in the directory where you have copied and pasted those certificates, right? And once you will, but first you have to have user admin that have the permission to write to this certificate manager. So the first thing you have to do is to go to IAM and provide that user with permission, then have the access key ID and the access token as well, and then run those commands that are mentioned in the documentation. Are the same one I have used it, and then when I will come to here, they are already imported here, as you can see. So I will wait this one until it's created, and they will come back to you.